With reports of allegations of COVID-19 related corruption by officials, are opposition parties playing the watchdog role to ensure corruption doesn't fester during the current crisis? Mkhuleko Hlengwa is the national spokesperson of the IFP and chairs the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. He joins me now to talk about this. Mkhuleko, thank you so much for your time tonight. I just want to first start off here by reading something that Professor William Gumede has said of opposition parties during this time. He says, South Africa's opposition parties appear to be confused. They're chasing shadows or paralyzed by the enormity of the COVID-19 crisis. What do you say to that?
I think it's a misplaced and misguided analysis, really. The bottom line is that we are all viewing this tragedy and this crisis and this pandemic from very different vantage points and applying different considerations, and therefore, unless he's specific, it's very difficult to make sense of what he's saying. I think this is a time to speak about specificities as opposed to the generalizations that he's making, because that very flawed argument that he makes presupposes that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, which is fundamentally not the case. The IFP remains of the view that the lockdown needs to be sustained in a manner which, on one hand, balances the collective sustainable livelihoods of our people, and that is, of course, the economic considerations that we need to make, and at the same time, we need to make sure that we save lives. Where we have fallen short as a country is that the governing party has totally been confused insofar as the government's applications of the lockdown are concerned. The issue here is that the lockdown was not meant to prevent the spread of the virus, but rather to prepare the country for that spread. The healthcare services are not in tip-tops. We still face with the situation whereby there is heightened confusion insofar as regulation formulation is concerned, and therefore the implementation is called into question. The IFP fundamentally believes that the government has missed an opportunity to actually do things right. And at the outset of this pandemic, we gave government our fullest of support, but we cannot continue supporting government when it actually itself is speaking from both sides of its mouth. You speak about social distancing and physical distancing on one hand, and on the other hand, you're saying that people can travel full load in taxis. You're speaking about opening of schools, but at the same time, you're keeping the schools closed. There is a long list of concerns which arise out of this, and then of course, to top it all off, in the midst of this entire tragedy we are faced with, corruption has reared its ugly head, and of course at the center of that corruption is the ANC. Therefore, the characterization of confusion by the so-called analyst is itself misplaced, misguided, and not representative of the prevailing realities on the ground, and the IFP has continued to be a voice of reason during this time, and that's certainly not confusion.
And Mkhuleko, a lot of our viewers tonight responding to this particular poll question say that opposition parties, in fact all political parties, are looking to enrich themselves. They really do not care about the interests of the people on the ground, because they say that all that political parties are doing is either it's the opposition that is criticizing the government of the day. They're also not happy about what the government of the day is also doing. What has the IFP done in a tangible way that has also benefited the people of South Africa directly?
Well, we are in government in 12 municipalities. Our municipalities were charged to make sure that the distribution of food parcels takes priority, particularly to the vulnerable communities. We made it a point that the provision of services continues uninterrupted during this point in time, and we made it a point that there's heightened cooperation between local government and provincial government, because we fundamentally believed that this is not a time for politicking. I think if the assessment is done even by independent assessors, they will find that the IFP has conducted itself in a manner befitting of the required response during this time. We have certainly not criticized for the sake of criticizing, but we have called out the things we believe government has failed, and there have been shortcomings, and have offered our full support to where government has done the right things. We have been a voice of reason during this time. It is, of course, unfortunate that politicking took place during this time. The mayor of Nkandla, for example, who is also the provincial chairman of the IFP, finds himself now arrested for actually performing the duties upon which he is expected to perform insofar as service delivery is concerned. In the Zululand district, we have got a serious water problem which predates the COVID-19, but there too there has been cooperation with the provincial government and the national government because we are fundamentally concerned that our people must be able to access services. So I think that in the final analysis it will be found that we as the IFP have risen above the petty political divides which has characterized this discourse. Unfortunately, we are fundamentally concerned about saving lives and ensuring that our people are actually at the forefront of receiving the benefits required of them. It's for this reason why we are concerned about the fact that government is willy-nilly opening and closing schools without a concrete plan. The Department of Basic Education has been found wanting in this regard. We have called for a debate of urgent national public importance with a view of finding solutions, not a blame game. So I don't think that the concerns which South Africans may have would be consistent in the analysis or assessment to the IFP. We have tried our level best to make sure that we put the national interest first. And this is why we are saying that we need to continue working together as a country, and at the same time government needs to do the right things, and they need to be disciplined. I think some ministers themselves have been excited by this whole time because of the airtime they are receiving and so on. That is not how we should be doing things. This is about saving lives, and there has been some frivolous court action, whereas we should be having discussion and, of course, assessing whether the legislation in place will assist. But I think the final issue of concern for us, but probably the most important, is the issue of corruption. The fact that we're stealing in the midst of a pandemic when we should be saving lives is in itself a huge indictment on government generally, ANC specifically, and they need to do right. But law enforcement agencies themselves need to, at this point in time, ensure successful prosecutions.
And Mkhuleko, I'm going to ask you to switch hats now and wear your hat as Scopa chair. Looking at the corruption allegations and the concerns that continue to mount there, what will you be doing as Scopa when it comes to some of these, these contracts that the SIU is also investigating? What are you also going to be doing as Scopa to ensure that we see more accountability there?
Well, I think maybe it would be important to clarify the parliamentary operations at this point in time, because I think there is a heightened level of confusion even in the public discourse about the expectations of Scopa. The bottom line is that the principal responsibility of oversight and accountability resides with the portfolio committees of Parliament, and therefore they are the first line of defense. Secondly, it's the Standing Committee on Appropriations, which monitors the current expenditure patterns. Then Scopa, of course, is the last line of defense when we come in after the fact. And if you even look at the rules of the National Assembly, it's very clear that our work is largely based on the Auditor General findings. But having said all of that, not to shirk off the responsibility, we are fully cognizant of the task at hand as on probing all the expenditure that has taken place. Without any pressure, we looked at the Bridge border post, the 37 million rands issue. We called in the UIF, amongst others, to come and explain themselves on how they were operating. But we are in discussion now as a committee on formulating a real-time oversight, as it were, to deal with all these issues. And so we are going to be interacting with the presiding officers of Parliament. But fundamentally, what we want to do is ensure that there's transparency and accountability. So where National Treasury has approved deviations and expansions of contracts, those will need to be explained, but government departments and entities themselves will be appearing before us to explain the full set of their own transactions, and we'll be probing those, whether fully or sampling. And then the last leg is to ensure that we have a meaningful discussion which is going to ensure that there is effectiveness and efficiency in the law enforcement agencies spectrum. We are concerned that the law enforcement agencies are not moving with the necessary speed. But I must also hasten to say that Parliament is not fundamentally at the center of the transactions and the procurement that takes place. We can only respond or react to what has already taken place. So we need to ensure that there is heightened discipline insofar as the accounting officers are concerned. And so greater collaboration needs to take place between us and the National Treasury, particularly the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. I think, Bongiwe, one can conclude it by saying that we had issued these warnings before. What we are worried about is the fact that there has been no due compliance with the PFMA, MFMA, and the National Treasury regulations and the Treasury notes, specifically notes 3 and 8. And so this is fundamentally because corruption in South Africa has become a permanent feature of our reality. So COVID or no COVID, this problem is there. And so even just today, the committee members, some have been in discussion about how we can improve on our modalities for operations to ensure effectiveness on our part. But what I can assure you of is that we are fully aware of the task at hand. We are equal to that task, and we are going to be rolling out probably an improved, oversight mechanism. I must say personally, I am highly disappointed at the fact that, and concerned and probably angered at the same time at the fact that we have to deal with this now when we are actually having to deal with a very serious pandemic. And so we are going to be mounting the pressure on the law enforcement agencies to do this. And ultimately, the president has made very serious, utterances in his last address. The pronouncements by the president need to be matched by the executive walking that talk. And so we are already scheduling a meeting with the presidency and the law enforcement agencies to appear before us to explain how they're going to be ensuring that we actually pull ourselves out of this very disastrous catastrophe, which has now, overshadowed us fighting the pandemic.
Thank you.